Hi, in today's video I want to show you a variation in a really early NuTone chime bass. So this is what I would refer to as a Series 2 NuTone chime bass. The earliest Series 1 chime basses, which I've done a video about, are the models with the clockwork mechanism in it. And then the Series 2 chime basses do have an electric motor inside the case, and then they have this revolving armature and these copper contact points. So this is a motor driven chime. I've done another video about a chime bass like this. It was a more elaborate version of this type of chime bass, and it was from around 1939. I think this one is a little later because it has some differences, and that's what I wanted to show you. The primary difference in this one has to do with the variable resistor assembly here, this portion of the chime that's used to adjust the voltage that goes to the four solenoids that cause the plungers to pop out. In the other chime video from 1939, it has a fairly complex design for this piece that's mounted over on the side here, and it consists of a fiberglass piece with the nichrome wire wound around it, but then there's a brass tab and a little brass piece that you pull out and slide up and down to make the connection and so forth. And this one is somewhat different because while we still have the fiberglass piece with the nichrome wire on it, we have this movable tab which arcs back and forth across the nichrome wire assembly to add resistance into the circuit to vary the power that goes to the solenoids. So this is a somewhat simpler design, and it was probably less expensive to manufacture, and it has a few less pieces. That I'm pretty sure this piece of bent copper strapping here was a lot less expensive than the other pieces they had to make. So this was sent in by a customer, and it had kind of an unusual problem, and I'll see if I can show you here. This variable resistor assembly here is a replacement for the original one. This is one that I made here in the shop because the original one showed up looking a lot like this. It's been burnt in half, which I think you might be able to see here. The end of it is all charred and burnt away. And this originally sat here and here. So you can see there's a fair chunk of it missing out of the middle. It's probably about 3/8 of an inch of it is burnt away and gone. And the nichrome wire that was wrapped around it was just all floating and everything. And of course, without this being intact and this movable adjustment strap here, without it being able to make a good connection, it's not going to work properly. And what apparently happened to this was the nichrome wire was connected. It's only really connected at one end. Up here at the top, it's connected ultimately through this screw that's isolated from the chassis, and there's a wire on the back side, and it carries one side of the low voltage output of the transformer, and then the nichrome wire at this end, at the bottom end, it's actually not connected to anything. It was held in place around this rivet right here, just to hold it in place, but it's not electrically connected to anything because the other side of the circuit is the actual strap right here, and the movable strap is riveted through the chassis, so the chassis carries the other side, or would be the common side of the low voltage output of the transformer, and that's what completes the circuit. And if you move the strap down here to the bottom of its arcing motion, you're further down the nichrome wire, so you've added more resistance, which drops the voltage to the solenoids. And if you move it back up here towards the top, it's less and less and less resistance until you get up to the very top, and you virtually have no added resistance, so the solenoids are getting full power. What happened on this apparently was the nichrome wire had broken loose from the back of the rivet that held it in place down here at the bottom, and it was touching this screw here, which is connected through the chassis also, and it's not isolated from the chassis. So the nichrome wire was connected to power here and here, and since nichrome wire is not only a really good resistance wire, but it's also the kind of wire that they use in heating elements in electric heaters. Basically what we had here was a little built-in electric heater inside the fella's chime. And with all of the years of it being hot, which I assume was probably quite a long time, it burnt away the fiberglass substrate that it was wrapped around, and you ended up with a burned up piece of fiberglass, or I think it's fiberglass. It could be Bakelite. I'm not exactly sure. It's probably Bakelite. That would be more likely than fiberglass. Anyway, especially for the time. So it was probably Bakelite. It was kind of a head scratcher to know what to do with this, and what I decided to do was fabricate something that did the same thing and approximated the look of the same one, because this is a fairly complicated thing to try to manufacture here at the shop. Well, getting a piece of Bakelite is probably possible still, a sheet of it, and cutting out a piece. These rivets that go through it, I don't really have anything to do that here. I'm going to look into what it would take. I'm sure there's some sort of hand version of this that would be available, but then on the other hand, how often am I ever going to really need to do this? So what I did was I took a couple pieces of fiberglass PCB board material and I epoxied them together to make them twice as thick, so it's pretty much the same thickness as the original piece. I drilled a hole here in the top and here in the bottom so it would mount properly. I left off the rivet at the bottom for the nichrome wire to wrap around because I didn't really have a way to do that. Up here at the top, the wire is wound around the threaded screw, and then there's a flat washer and the nut to hold it in place, and that should be fine. And then on the back of it, then I wrapped the nichrome wire around and around and around and around to simulate what the original design was. It's probably not quite as neat and orderly as the original one, but doing it by hand is an interesting thing to try to do. It's not nearly as simple as you would think to keep it on there tight and make it even and so forth, but I think it turned out pretty well, and it does work properly. It does vary the voltage as you move the wiper along it, so that's the ultimate goal. And then on the back side, I tucked it underneath one of the other wrappings, wound it around it a little bit to hold the end in place, and then I simply put some adhesive over it and let it dry. It's a heat resistant adhesive, so it will hold the nichrome wires it holds them so they're separated, because you don't want them all touching, you want them all apart with a gap, and it should hold them in place just fine, and I don't think it'll ever be a problem. So it's just an interesting variation on an earlier version. I'm going to guess that this is also, this also has one other interesting aspect to it. I'm going to guess this is a late or mid 40s, just before World War II chime, because one of the other things that's different is the way it mounts to the wall. All of the other chimes, like this basic design, this copper colored metal box that I've shown in videos, they all mount on the wall like this, and then there's usually a screw right here in the top that you take out, and the front piece hinges down and that way you can get to the plate on the back of the wall to attach it, and the wires come through the wall and you can hook it all up. This one's different in that there is no back on it. It has these two keyway slots on these little angle pieces that are welded to the side of the box here and here. And so you would put screws in the walls. I don't know if they had anchors in those days, maybe molly bolts or toggle bolts back in the 40s, and you would put those in the wall and then hang it on the wall. Or I suppose you would have a plaster wall with wooden lath behind it, and you put the screw into the lath. That would be good. Anyway, there's no back on it, so it's got to be one of the last versions of this type of chime that they made, and I can only see this really as a cost-saving measure. I don't think, after having made them for as long as they had, that it was a better design choice. It had to be mostly just to save money. So as a quick overview, it is one of those types of chimes where here we have our clock motor here. It's not a Telecron motor assembly like later ones had. There is no name on it, and I don't know who made it because it doesn't say. We have our lamp socket here, which is porcelain, of course, or ceramic. It has its own built-in 20-volt transformer. So these two wires here, this black with the cloth covered white one attached to it, and then the white wire here, these are wire up to 110 volts. This is the transformer is the Chime's own built-in low voltage source. So in today's world, you'd never get by with this. Anyway, you have a pull chain switch here which turns the light on and off, and then you have your 4 solenoids with plungers and springs. So it's very much like the 1939 chime base in that respect, although the 1939 chime had a few more bells and whistles on it. But all in all, it's very similar in design except without the back, and it has a different type of variable resistor assembly here. That's pretty much it. I just wanted to show you the difference because I hadn't seen one exactly like this before. This was serviced and it works properly now, and I'm sure the customer is looking forward to getting it back. I hope you found this to be interesting and perhaps helpful. If you did, please give it a thumbs up on YouTube because that always helps. There'll be a banner right here that shows you how to subscribe. Please go to our YouTube homepage, click on the bell or on the wheel, put in your email address, and every time we post a new video, you'll get a notification to let you know there's something new to watch. That's all for today. See you on the next video.